Indie Game Garden.
Dylan Smith worked at Epic Games for over 8 years in their IT department. After being laid off in corporate restructuring efforts twice, Dylan had a thought. Why not make a space in games that can support developers month by month without promising a capitalist-coded product? Why not provide a space where people can support video games as a part of a community, treating video games like the art form that they are? Those thoughts provided the philosophical underpinning for the Fair Play Collective, a community-funded, creator-owned experiment in indie developer mutual aid. It's an organization that Dylan founded himself and is on the show to talk about today, in addition to a lot of fun other things related to games. I really enjoyed our conversation, so let's get to it. Dylan, thank you so much for being here to be on Indie Game Garden. You are kind of the founder and champion of the Fair Play Collective. And before we dive into your story, I would love to hear more about what the Fair Play Collective is, how it came to be, and the ethos behind the project.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And again, thank you for having me on here and kind of putting up with the back and forth of trying to find a time for me and all that. So Fair Play Collective kind of at its core, and I'm going to literally read like the 2 sentences on the website because I think that that's the best tagline. It's a community funded, creator owned experiment in backer funded indie developer mutual aid. It's a lot of words just kind of compiled into a couple of sentences there. So really what it is the idea of funding indie development from a kind of a community backer's perspective. And we went with, Fair Play just as a name because like the idea of things being fair and equitable, but a collective because it kind of imbues this attitude of everyone is kind of in this thing together, which goes against the kind of rising tide of this black box of development that we currently see, where developers are putting forth just so much effort. Any kind of studio, indie, AA, AAA, any kind of studio, they're putting forth a lot of effort into what they're creating, but there's no real visibility into who's creating it, where it's coming from, the artists, the developers. What that often leads to is a weird sense of ownership from gamers and from venture capitalists, from publishers, where, people feel like they're really owed a something at the end that maybe they don't feel like they got right out the gate. And so that you run into things like review bombing and just like really bad attitude towards the developers of games. And wrapping all that back around, I wanted a real collective of people to support specifically indie development, because indie development is difficult and it's expensive and it doesn't make a lot of money. And so, we wanted to find a funding opportunity where gamers, people could be involved in the funding of indie development of indie games to support that side of the industry, as well as really understand who the developers are, who the artists are, and all of that. So in a nutshell, that's Fair Play Collective. It's an opportunity to fund the development of indie games at a $5 a month tier, and with backer incentives, dev diaries, asset packs, demos, early access if folks want to provide that, without any kind of creative control over what's being created, who's creating it, within reason, and when it's released. Kind of just giving that power back to the developers to create what they want as an art form, as something weird, as something niche, whatever they want to create.
The main thing that comes to mind for me is like in 2026 here, I feel like anyone who's at all interested in media or being online or what have you is kind of overly inundated with like, Patreon, other forms of community funding. And one of the things that I think it's important to hear from you on is like how the Fair Play Collective is different, how you envision it being different, And one of the things right off the bat that I noticed that maybe is a larger part of this answer, or maybe just one piece, is like there's no like pay more, get more. It's kind of just like pay a flat rate and get everything at the $5 there. And I was just wondering, like, can you speak more on that? How you're differentiating yourself from these kind of like large corporations that are doing this for their business, as far as like supporting indie creators and taking a cut? How is Fair Play Collective different?
Yeah. First, I want to hit the just the very end there of large corporations kind of doing these for their business. It's wild to me when you have like I I don't know, like Double Fine. And look, I like Double Fine a lot, but Double Fine makes a ton of money. It's wild to me that Double Fine has a Kickstarter or had a Kickstarter, right? So let me start with the kind of like how we're kind of different than Kickstarter from. And I hate that I don't know if it's Coffee or Ko-Fi, Coffee or Ko-Fi and Patreon. I think we're probably more similar to Patreon if you want to find something analogous. But ultimately, one of the challenges for creating a game and getting funding, especially at the like Kickstarter level, is the vertical slice. And for anyone who doesn't know what the vertical slice is, ultimately what you need to do to have a successful, really a successful Kickstarter or a successful publisher journey is you have to have a basically a version of your game that shows off kind of all the assets or all the aspects at every level, kind of in one slice. So from the top down, from the art to the systems, to the AI, to all of the pieces, you have to have what looks like a finished product in that piece of it. Now, of course, you don't have a finished product, but you've got the slice of what all looks finished. And you have to be able to show that off, especially in Kickstarter. You have to be able to show that off to the people that you're trying to get funding from. And there's several problems to that. One of the issues with that is that there's no way to pivot. There's no room to pivot when you have a vertical slice. You say, "Hey, this is what my finished product's going to be." And I've used this example before, and it's a really stupid example, mostly because I'm not a developer. So throw that out there really early, transparently. I'm not a developer. I don't have a developer background. I have lots of video games background, and I have a tech background in IT. So this is why my example is stupid. But if you're making a car racing game and it's got a fishing side game on it, and it turns out that fishing side game is a lot more fun and engaging, if you're on Kickstarter, you can't pivot and be like, just kidding, we're going to make this fishing game, because everyone's expecting the car game. So the other side is also within Kickstarter. It's a kind of take the money and go. I won't say run, but take the money and go model, where you put yourself out there, whatever your product is, and people pay you however much money. Hopefully you way exceed your expectations. You get a bunch of money. But then it's just kind of from there, it's on faith that you're going to make that thing. And there are plenty of examples where that didn't happen. Things went wrong. Refunds weren't issued. And that's problematic for the consumer. So there's problems for the consumer. There's problems for the creator on both of those sides. And that can be tough. There's also just a lot of other issues with kind of just like it being a pageant for just making your Kickstarter look nice, look pretty. Whoever has the best marketing really gets the best Kickstarter on there, and that's tough. So what we wanted to do is create a system, again, where there is like really no creative control, where the idea is video games are art and art deserves to exist, but then also solve for the consumer issues of, take the money and run. Who do this black hole of where's my money going into at the end of it? And am I going to get the product that I was promised? As well as the ability to kind of, as a developer, change your mind or pivot or create something slightly different if you need to, or be able to have problems and still receive funding. And so the model is that a developer submits an application to Fair Play Collective. We have a council of developers, of QA, of PMs, project managers, producers, if you will, and just people from the industry with knowledge that then can sit there and pick, which developer is going to be funded based on projects, and then they submit a timeline as well. And that's evaluated, how long are they going to need to produce this game to get to a 1.0 status? And then we start funding. And the funding is given out on a month-to-month basis, not a lump sum at once. And each of those month-to-month bases require a monthly check-in to say, where are you in your timeline? How's it going? We can check out if there's any scope creep, if there are problems, if they need to pivot, we can talk about that too. And that's okay. Like, again, we're not exerting any creative control. We just want to say, great, maybe you need an extra month on this because fishing is better than driving the car. And that's totally fine. Because the other side of this is the backers, while it's impossible to say the backers aren't funding a project, what we're really going to push is the backers are funding developers. Because we're also not paying for a finished product. So the pitch doesn't say I need $1 million to get this thing done in 6 months. The pitch says, this is who I am, this is where I live, this is how I'm developing. And what we're providing for is a fair living wage on a month-to-month basis, not a full-blown project payment. So the idea is that the backer is paying for these developers to be able to develop things and not go hungry, not be able to afford to live their lives while they're developing things. So with the monthly check-in, making sure people are on track, scope is good. We have our kind of counsel to counsel them on well, it looks like a little scope creep here. Maybe we can adjust this. Maybe you can adjust this rather, because again, no creative control. The backers know that that's being checked on. They know that things are proceeding as they should be proceeding because they're able to see the timeline. They're able to see where the money's going on that month-to-month basis. And the developer is able to produce something that they want to produce, even if it's very different than what they started with, or if it needs to change up a little bit, or if they need a little more time. And so I think it gives everyone a little breathing room. And it allows both sides to really understand what's going on. There's no black box anymore. You understand who the developer is. You understand what they're doing, all their dev diaries, a day in the life of, all that stuff as a backer. And then when it comes to the tiering or lack of tiering, that was honestly a relatively, recent isn't the right word, a couple months development. We had initially the idea of tiers, but it just didn't sit right. As kind of going back to it being a collective and the idea of equity, the idea of paying for more didn't sit right with me. And also, frankly, the barrier of entry is a lot lower for $5. If there's enough people that are paying $5 a month, then we can fund what we can fund, and everyone can kind of just get the same experience all the way around. And that really kind of circles back to it being collective, it being an equitable thing where nobody is paying more for anything. And that's one of the kind of key pieces on the website. You're not paying for your spot on FPC any more than anyone else. You're paying for the same spot as everyone. You're paying for the same privileges as everyone. And so it just kind of was one of those things that popped up, and I said, what, this is a way closer to the kind of to the mission than it would be to pay $5 for this, $10 for this and more, $15 for this and more. So that's how we kind of got to that spot.
Yeah, reframing in particular the idea of not paying for a final product necessarily, but paying to, help a developer live and develop is a subtle, yet I think really important distinction as far as just the origin of the Fair Play Collective, because I think one of the things that frustrates me the most when it comes to games in particular, since it is such a commercialized art form at this point, is we do think about it, even the folks who are intent on, supporting indie developers, we do think about it in terms of well, buy this indie developer's game or else,
Yeah.
And it's such a black and white choice instead of a more gradual and healthy level of support. And it sounds like that's what Fair Play Collective is striving to uphold and create, honestly, since there's not other outlets for that in the industry currently.
Right. And I don't think it's going to be I don't think that that's going to connect with everyone day one, frankly. I've already been pushing a lot of socials lately, and it's really interesting, like the difference between like socials on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. People on YouTube are really, really vocal, and just kind of generally unhappy. And I think that's just kind of like, the meme of, God, the YouTube comments are the worst on regular YouTube videos. But there's definitely like an attitude of, why would I pay for something I don't know is going to finish? Or why would I pay for something I can't see the end of, or don't know what it's about? And frankly, like, I really like, I'd like us to combat that attitude a lot. And just, there are plenty of other outlets out there where people pay for art to exist, like patrons of the art, right? Like charities, lots of things that exist already like that out there. And don't get me wrong, we're not a charity. I don't think video games are a charity or necessarily should be a charity. I don't want to give everybody that, it's a completely altruistic endeavor. It's very altruistic, but it's not a completely altruistic endeavor. Still, people need to make their money. But at the same time, like, I think there's space for people to give some of their well-earned money to the creation of this as an art form, without expecting the game that comes out of it to be your game that you want, without expecting it to be something that makes millions of dollars out the gate. Like, let's just like have a space where games can be created without maybe knowing even like what that game is going to be exactly at the end, but knowing that these developers are cool. These are their stories. This is how they work. If you're interested in like comic books, or if you are a sports fan, generally you know a lot about the comic book artists, and you know a lot about the athletes. Like you know what they do, their ins and outs. Anyone that is a Carolina Panthers fans like knows Cam Newton is this wild kind of crazy dude and spells things, with uppercase and lowercase letters and just really weird, quirky things like that. I can't really tell you a developer that I know things about them that intimately. And I'm not trying to we're not trying to make rock stars again. Like, the other side of this is that we're not necessarily trying to make these superstars that we would put up on pedestals, but like just knowing who they are, and what they do in their hobbies, and like what their art looks like, and how they develop. That seems like something that's valuable that we're really missing. Again, going back to that black box of development. So part of this is also just humanizing it from a backer's perspective. Say, oh, these are people that are making things that deserve to be able to make things. Help them out with your money, and get some cool things out of it. Again, it's not purely altruistic. You're not saying like, just give us your money, you get nothing back. We're saying, hey, give us some of this, and you can support these developers. And here's these cool things that you'll get back from it on a month-to-month basis to help fund these cool video games.
How do you see like Fair Play Collective creating community, or I guess what is the benefit beyond the like tangible, like you're getting this asset pack, or you're getting this early look into a game, or you're getting this developer log?
I'm going to give you a cop-out answer and say some of that was just what I talked about, is really just humanizing developers and humanizing the process of this, because that is so not a thing that's done right now, is understanding the people behind these things. But then also just like, as FPC stands right now as just kind of the website and not a whole lot more, it's not bringing a ton of necessarily community together, but I do feel like once we're rolling and we've got full membership, we've got spaces for developers to talk to the backers and gamers on the regular, then you create a space that doesn't really exist. There are some kind of community hub-ish areas, like Itch has a full community hub. I don't think it's utilized super heavily. And I'd love to create more space like that, where it's just not about, again, it's such a transactional existence right now of gamers and video games. And then whoever's making them in the middle maybe doesn't even like account in there, unless they're like making Balatro and they're the one dude making Balatro and everybody knows who that is, or making Stardew Valley, right? But there's like, it's this transactional, like I buy the game, I play the game, the end. And there's not a connection therein. And also that transactional kind of piece of it, means a certain amount of like folks expecting, like creative control, of expecting their own kind of like their kind of bag in it. And that
Mhm.
goes back to like Kickstarter and kind of all the pieces like, oh, if you pay this much, then you get to name a character, you get to have a town named after you. You can pick one of the achievements or whatever. And we're not doing that, frankly. um,
Right.
if you're part of Fair Play, as a backer, you're going to get the same thing that everybody else is going to get, which isn't creative control and isn't kind of like a stake in what's being made, because you agree that you don't need that necessarily. What's cool is that you can just help fund the thing being made. And I really hope that as we open these community kind of pieces up to it, and backers are able to talk to developers in these kind of specific spaces, that because we're not already kind of prescribing that you have a stake in this other than your credits in the end of the game, that just kind of in turn turns into actual like human dialogues between these people. And so again, it humanizes gamers to developers and developers to gamers, or artists to gamers, or whatever, where you can have a conversation with what you do and don't like about the experience without needing to be like, and fix that. And I expect you to do it differently or whatever. Right. Um, so that's the goal of the kind of community side of it. And we've already got, we've got an open Discord right now. The Discord eventually will be kind of parted out into like a developer space and a backer space, but right now it's like it's wide open. It's really cool because we are so kind of early in on this still, despite the fact that I kind of spun this up last June. We're still kind of really like kind of figuring out all the pieces. But like if you're in that Discord, there's a bunch of developers in there who are throwing out really cool ideas for what FPC could be outside of, hey, this is what I want it to be for it to work for me. And then there's also like, there's consumers in there who are throwing out really cool ideas about like what FPC could be outside of, hey, these are the things that I want to have in this thing. So like, there's already kind of a piece of where we've just talked about the space enough, and we've talked about the expectation, and people are just kind of in there doing that thing already. And so I just hope that expands and expands and expands, so that there is a space for backers and consumers to talk to developers and artists and the people creating games without any kind of transactional nature to it, without any kind of expectation to it. Just like, hey, it's cool that you're making this. I love to see this and understand it and help pay for it, kind of thing. It's real ethereal and out there, maybe.
No, it's important to hear, and that's kind of what I like to get at on this show, to like just the philosophical underpinnings, and we'll include like the website and the Discord invite in the show notes as well for folks listening to join. Moving forward, I would love to hear more about your path to founding the Fair Play Collective and your journey with games, Dylan. What kind of what's brought you to wanting to like start up such a venture?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I'm not a developer, but I am someone who's played video games, all my life. Which, right? So what? That doesn't make me necessarily special in that lots of people play video games and have played video games all their life. And frankly, none of this makes me special in any of this. I just want to point that out. Like anybody can have great ideas, even if this isn't a great idea, and just move on them. There's no ego in any of this, to be clear. But what kind of spawned what this exists as today? I worked for Epic Games for around 8 years. I started as a just IT support contractor. And then I led the internal IT support teams for about 6 or 7 years. It was really ultimately a pretty cool experience working in the industry, working for Epic. My team and I was a different lead at various points in time. I led a couple of other teams as well. But generally, we were supporting all of the artists and developers and anyone who had a computer within Epic. That's what my teams supported. However, in 2023, Epic did their big 1,200 person layoff. I was one of those people. And then actually, my boss at the time hit me up that November and was like, "Hey, if I can get you back on contract, we've got some more stuff I need you to do. Could you do it?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I came back and I worked as a contractor for another year, and then Epic cut like 11% of contractors. I was cut again. So through the ringer twice with Epic, and that wasn't really the impetus for starting it necessarily. That was kind of just the beginning thoughts of, oh man, layoffs. It wasn't until, I don't know, last May, whenever it was, that Microsoft laid off like 9,000 people. Admittedly, not all of them were folks in the industry, but a lot of them were. I was just having a conversation with one of my friends in the neighborhood about it would be kind of cool if, this is a really stupid statement, if video games were like taxes. Or at least the way taxes should be, where you pay into a system and then the system pays you back in, whatever it's created for you. And I kind of I threw that idea around with him for a little bit. And then my wife and kid went out of town for like 4 days. And I was just at home thinking about this. And I just started writing pieces of it down. And it looked fairly different than as it exists right now. Again, we had tiers. There were some other pieces to it that we don't have, or we do have now that we didn't have. But the idea was just like, man, it would be cool to have just a pool, basically, where you could throw in your money and it could go to really the people that are deserving of that money to make cool video games. And having been at, a AAA for almost a decade and just seeing how that worked, and Epic, I won't badmouth Epic on here, because again, like, I did 8 really fun years at Epic. Certainly they had their issues. But at the same time, watching Epic because I was right before Fortnite when I started, watching Epic go from like where they had Paragon and the legacy of Unreal and Gears to just kind of a singular, I don't know, metaverse-ish thing. It just it became something very, very different. It stopped feeling like a company that was making a singular kind of cool thing or some like individual cool things. And so I just went back to that, like, it'd be great to support people who are making a thing, a tangible thing that is fun and unique, rather than this all-encompassing behemoth. And so all of that really led to the culmination of saying, indie developers and indie artists and stuff like that had a really hard time, especially after the boom of indie, back in Braid and Fez and all of those games that were just like huge. And indie was like, everyone could, if you were an indie developer, you could just throw out your idea and publishers would be like, yeah, let's do this. It's not like that anymore at all.
Yeah.
And so just wanted to create a space for that. And the community part of it wasn't so much of it other than the humanizing aspect of it. And if you, and actually we still have the old website. The website that's up right now, is, more in line with what our style guide is, and stuff like that. But like, it really started as, honestly, I wrote a manifesto. And I even used the word manifesto because it's kind of a divisive, inflaming word, right? And I wanted to kind of throw out there, hey, there's important ideas that can come from this. And I put it in a document called Manifesto, and I threw it on a Notion site that then I turned into a real website. That website still exists. So if you go to fairplaycollective.org/manifesto, you can get to the original one. The manifesto isn't in the new one. Pieces of it are, and it will be once we really build out the new back end of it. But you can see really the origins of those ideas. And then it kind of picked up traction from there. Somebody at Vice, Sean Kachaki, wrote an article about us, which was crazy because I just got a LinkedIn message one day. I was like, hey, I worked for Vice and I want to write an article about Fair Play Collective. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? We're 2 weeks into this. Awesome. So that was really cool. But yeah, so again, it just kind of all culminated in the fact that I was laid off kind of a couple times. And then, from there it spiraled. You have during COVID, the crazy COVID hiring boom in the tech sector and gaming sector. where some of these companies hired 1,000 people a year during that, and then all these venture capitalists came in and said, "Oh, we need our money really early." And so many of these companies like went under or had to pull a ton of people to lay them off to like stay profitable. And that really started in like 2022. I think since 2022, there's been like 40,500 estimated layoffs, and like that's citable. There's a website that you can go and track those numbers, and that just kind of sucks. And so we wanted to build something that didn't allow for that. And so again, kind of in the manifesto, in the FAQ, we've got kind of our terms and agreements that if you're working for FPC, you've got to agree that you're not going to lay anyone off. We understand that people are going to let people go and they're going to have issues with creative direction and stuff like that. And that's okay. But like, you can't lay off a portion of your workforce and be eligible for FPC funding. You can't sexually harass your employees. You can't verbally abuse your employees. You can't partake in crunch culture. All of those things that like just shouldn't exist in this industry, and somewhere that, people are creating cool art that is now turned into this like capitalistic hellscape. We want to create a space where those things aren't, and people can fund you to create what you want to create without creative control.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating to hear that like those are the, in quotes, like restrictions, when in reality it's like not even in a perfect world, just in a like decently well functioning world,
we
that
shouldn't
would just
have to
be
say those
the
things.
standard. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so
let me tell you,
it's awesome that there is a space upholding that, decently functioning world type value. And I think one of the things that keeps coming to mind for me throughout this conversation, but also as I think about the industry at large, is how many weird and cool ideas we are getting in today's day and age.
Yeah.
Like, thanks to the layoffs and thanks to unfortunately game developers having to scramble and like make their own projects in small teams, is like we're getting ideas that are, in quotes again, greenlit by these, groups of 2 to 10 to 15 people that would never have worked or come about in a more larger studio environment. When there's more overhead and more people making decisions that aren't at the creative level. And I think one of the things that is really cool about that is that you can go on Steam, any day of the week and find like 10 games that look lovely and are introducing you to new ideas. But you can also like feel overwhelmed very quickly if you do that.
Absolutely.
And so one of the ways that I like to contextualize FPC within this greater landscape is like, it's obviously not trying to solve anything. Like, that's not the operative word, but it's more like a release valve almost, in my mind, as far as like taking a little bit of pressure out of that saturation, taking a little bit of pressure off of certain developers who have their stuff together and certain consumers who want to buy into something that is more gradual, as you say, like not lump sum, not like, oh, right when you release a game, you get your budget for the next game based on how well it does. And I think like we get closer to a decently functioning industry, the more people support FPC, the more people, like you said, who have ideas and who have an interest in supporting developers create organizations like FPC. And the more we hear out the types of ideas that we are discussing on this call. So I think that's awesome to hear. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Just like, do you have any kind of closing thoughts on that discussion or that loop before we get into maybe some questions that are a little less related?
Yeah. And actually, I thank you for like kind of that last piece, especially because I'm actually probably going to steal the pressure release valve ideology there, because that's a really, really, really cool kind of way of thinking about this that has been very similar to how I'm thinking, but I haven't been able to really verbalize it like that. And then kind of calling out that it's not, FPC isn't here to fix the industry, because frankly, the industry kind of isn't inherently one thing anymore. It's so many different pieces. we're not in the PlayStation 1 era where like you've got folks creating PlayStation games and N64 games, and that's kind of it. And maybe PC games if you have a nice computer. There's so many facets to it, and so kind of many different pieces to it that to say like, oh, we're gonna fix the industry would be crazy and super egotistical to even think. But then B, like, the industry doesn't necessarily need fixing. The industry needs spaces. It needs different ways to do things. And one of the things I really want to be like transparent about is that FPC probably shouldn't be the only space, the only new space in the industry doing something like this, and even shouldn't be like an exclusive space. If you're a developer and you've got a successful Kickstarter, but you still want to be funded by FPC, like great, that's fine. If you got a Patreon, like personally, that's helping you develop and you want to be funded by FPC, great, that's fine. That's also fine. About the only time it wouldn't be fun is if you've got a publisher that's going to pay you $2 billion to like make your project, because that's kind of its own thing. If anything, I want FPC to be helpful in this space, and I guess like you said, like being a pressure release valve for this thing that's just gotten so huge and money centric and commercialized and capitalist, that yeah, like just creating space for a different path forward, for people to view developers differently as people, for developers to have room to pivot creatively and not feel like they're beholden to this vertical slice. And then again, like just like this, the pairing of the people who want to help and the people who are making the things that are cool things. I just want that to exist. And I think enough people want that to exist that it's a decent idea. So yeah, again, like pressure release valve is super cool terminology going forward with this. I love it.
I'm excited to support Fair Play Collective in the future, hopefully monetarily too, but with my words as much as I can. And one of the things that I wanted to close the loop on talking about, just hearing you mention how kind of like, I guess, questioning the even basis of the term industry for video games anymore is something that really resonates with me. And it's something that Meredith Gran, who is the creator of Perfect Tides and a kind of remake of, or a continuation of Perfect Tides called Perfect Tides Station to Station, just came out, which is also awesome. Meredith Gran went to GDC recently and posted a really good blog post about it, which is obviously GDC is like a major industry event and it's kind of has this historical weight to it. But basically what she was saying, which I really resonated with, was like, basically it's no longer worth calling it an industry, which harkens back to what you were talking about with like, it's no longer just kind of these very moneyed interests creating commercial games that kind of have this baseline of success because they're on a system that is in X amount of homes and et cetera. And we're hearing all this stuff about, how Xbox is kind of in turmoil because they have they're obviously have been fumbling their studios and now they're advertising this upcoming Xbox, which is basically a PC, and people are like, what's that going to be? Meanwhile, PlayStation might be doubling down on taking their games off of PC, probably in response to that. And there's just obviously these whole, you can see the fissures at the level of, if you're looking at the historical like console level, but then you can also see the fissures as far as like these visionary creators like Meredith Gran saying like, I want games to now just be a collection of spaces, kind of like what you were saying. And I just want to operate in my little space where I have my community of folks who support me. And like, if that's possible, it's a good day. And I think that like creating more spaces and having those spaces be more interconnected, feels like a lot more healthy and sustainable, if a bit more, disconnected than it just being one industry. I think like creating spaces and then really focusing on the connective tissue between them is what will make um, the games industry feel healthier, or what we previously knew as the games industry feel healthier and also more like respected, and in that way like gives people who invest in it respect, whether that's investing time as a games player or investing, elbow grease and years of blood, sweat, and tears as a developer, what have you. And so I just thought that like that was kind of a jumbled way of saying, like, I thought the idea that you brought up of questioning the whole concept of industry is a really important part of this conversation, and a really important reason why I'm excited to have you on Indie Game Garden, so that we can be two spaces that are connected moving forward, and hopefully to continue to champion these things.
Absolutely. And like, I mean, just the kind of culmination of that is just decentralizing video games ultimately into these various spaces, and that is important. And kind of through this, as I've set this up, I have talked to, I don't know, I've had like conversations, not podcasts, but like just conversations with folks on Zoom calls. I probably had like 70 conversations with people since June. No one that I knew before, and like, there are a bunch of people doing very similar, not like exactly what we're doing, but like very similar, like, let's just form a group of people that are very interested in helping out this in the industry. Like, you've got like Hidden Gems, who are, going to be like a social platform hiring ground, basically. You've got glizzy.au, which is a indie game platform that gives 100% back to developers. And I've had conversations with people from these spaces, K-Bear Studios, who is going to kind of build a collective as well. And everyone is kind of like in this same kind of brain space of, let's separate these out. Let's intelligently separate these out, but stay connected and help each other out. Like, let's form little collectives here and there that can create spaces to create cool experiences. And on that as well, like going back to these very purpose-built platformers from the PS1 era or whatever, or even like, nowadays, I think indie games oftentimes provide themselves spaces to create experiences that might be uncomfortable otherwise, and might not, be, super fiscally responsible in a big studio, to develop these ideas that I think are important to have and to show, that like we just need more space for those things to be created and for them to be delivered out into the world, frankly.
I was wondering, just getting into a bit more like fun conversation and wrapping up our conversation, like, what are some of your favorite games? What are the games that have inspired you to invest in the community more than just like, oh, I played a game and I enjoyed it? Like, what are the games that inspire you?
The two most important games to me off the cuff are Hollow Knight and Outer Wilds. And I'm going to be real hipster and say, I liked them before they were super huge. But seriously, I think both of those games tell stories in a entirely unique way. And Outer Wilds might be the most important out of those, because it is such a, and if you've never played Outer Wilds or know anything about Outer Wilds, go into it completely blind, please. But Outer Wilds is such a unique way of storytelling in that the game almost entirely exists on you kind of figuring out what's going on without anyone telling you, and just finding pieces of this puzzle during this thing that's happening on your own, and somehow manages to tell a pretty linear story, despite the fact that you could be anywhere in that game doing literally anything at any time. Like, you're not safeguarded from anything from the start. You have every tool accessible to you from the very beginning of that game. There are no upgrade paths, nothing. And yet it still manages to guide you from kind of point A to point Z, even knowing you could get to point Z from point A if you knew exactly how to do it. Like, it's just such a wildly inventive way to do that game, and to tell a story. And I just, it was one of those games where we had our kid, and we had just kind of gotten her sleep trained so that she would go to bed without us at some point in time. And I think she was probably like 6 months old. And like all of the sudden, my wife and I realized, holy crap, we've got an evening again. Like that's when you're not used to that for a while, all of a sudden, like the 2 hours that you'd have before bed being open is amazing. And so like we sat down, and it's not a 2-player game, but we sat down and basically kind of just started up this game, and as an experience kind of passed the controller back and forth on the couch and like had a blast just experiencing the entire thing. It was really incredible. And so like just kind of off the cuff, that game is like wildly influential to like what I expect out of storytelling in a game. And then Hollow Knight was around the era that she was born, so she was very, very little. Our daughter was very little, and basically, we would have her on a changing pad on the floor, sleeping, and we were sitting there playing Hollow Knight in the living room in our apartment at the time. But then, like outside of that, I've got a lot of deep nostalgia for Ocarina of Time, which I think everyone my age does, or that first Zelda that they played. It's the same with Final Fantasy, right? Everybody has that, like, I played Final Fantasy 7 first, so it's my favorite. Actually, 9's my favorite, even though I played 7 first. But if we're talking about like really important indie games, especially kind of in this manner, the games that really like stand out to me, Dread Delusion is a game that is currently out. Developers Lovely Hellplace. Dread XP might be publisher. But it's a very strange, it came out in 2024. It is a open world first person RPG, very likened to Morrowind, in that it's just kind of got this weird feel to it, weird landscapes. The art direction is very kind of PS1 jank oriented, and in fact, there's some settings that you can turn the jank on or off. But it's a wildly interesting game with really cool mechanics and just one of the coolest like worlds that I've ever experienced in a game. That's one of my absolute favorite recent games. In that, let's see what else. Unpacking, again, wildly popular, but just like I really like games that tell stories interestingly. And so Unpacking, if you've never played it, is a game where you are literally just manipulating objects between moving from place to place in the new places. And it has no dialogue whatsoever. I don't even know that I can't remember if there's writing or not in it, but it manages to tell a story of this woman from her childhood to adulthood through her moves. And there's very poignant storytelling in it through all of that.
Yeah.
Bug Snacks by Young Horses is one of my favorite games. Again, a really weird game about strange bugs that you can eat on this island. I played through it with my daughter. It's one of the first games we played together. Celeste, Celeste for very clear reasons of the story that it tells and how important it is, that like so many people connected to. Like, if you ever watch, I'm a very devout follower of Games Done Quick. Every year I watch, and I actually went last year for the first time.
Oh, cool.
And Celeste is a really big part of that whole experience of, trans lives are real lives, trans lives are human lives kind of thing. And so like Celeste is really important there. And then, there's a ton of, frankly, AAA games that I absolutely love out there. But yeah, I think those are kind of like the really like impactful kind of stories that I can call up right now. I do have like 300 hours in Elden Ring. I have like 500 hours in Skyrim. So plenty of those too.
Yeah.
But yeah, out of the indie games, I think those are the ones that really kind of called to me the most.
One of the things I was trying to remember to say after one of our previous kind of exchanges, but it came back to me here in talking about games and connecting with a lot of what you said, is like, there's no shortage of like passion for games, and like that's never going to not be the case. That's never going to go away. Like, there's something very human to connect with like authored experiences that kind of stimulate our minds in so many different ways. The fact that like FPC is able to support that even in a small way is so worthwhile and such a, yeah, I mean, I have no other word for it, like such an important endeavor. So I really appreciate you coming on to talk with me about it. And Dylan Smith, I was wondering if there's anything you kind of wanted to sign off with or leave listeners with. I'll put everything we've discussed in the show notes, but wanted to kind of give you the last word here.
Yeah, no, just that, like, this is still really early days, and I don't say that in terms of like, who knows what's going to happen, but rather like help inform what's going to happen. Come be part of this in any way, shape, or form. You mentioned that you'd love to be part of this. You already are part of it. You're in the Discord. We're having this conversation here. Like, just be part of it in any capacity that you can. It doesn't necessarily need monetarily. Like, I don't mind if you want to be monetarily. That's really cool too. But at the same time, like, having the conversation with us, we are very much at a point where, any idea is a good idea and any idea is a bad idea. And that if we're doing something and you're like, holy crap, Dylan, that's really stupid, like, let me know. Like, that's okay. We're, very much evaluating all of this, and we have some like timeline set and some goals, but at the end of the day, I really want a system that is going to work and make sense. And it'll take as long as it needs to take to create that system that works and makes sense to do this. Like, we're not rushing into anything. We're not trying to throw bad ideas out there. We're just trying to throw really good, community-driven, passionate ideas out there. So come be part of it. Be part of the Discord. Sign up for all the, Blue Sky is where we're talking about things a lot generally, and Discord. Check out the website. There's a lot more to the website coming. So don't judge me on my really terrible nested divs in CSS, because I'm going to actually have a backend developer help me with the real website. But yeah, just be part of it and talk to us about it, please. Like, that's like the most important part of this, is having people who are helping develop this vision.
Sweet. Well, yes, please go down in the show notes and support FPC in all of those ways. And Dylan Smith, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah. Thank you, Johnny. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
And that was Dylan. I loved speaking to him. I feel like he had a lot of bright, insightful, and kind of industry-wide insights. You can tell he's been thinking about this from a bit broader of a lens than some of our other guests, who are obviously game makers themselves, and who are thinking about it just as far as selling their one vision. Dylan is more focused on a vision that can support folks like that, and so they don't need to be so single-minded and sell, and instead can focus on creating the idea that kind of they set out to make, and that fulfills their artistic vision. And I love that he is providing a place where we can buy into that vision and become part of a community in supporting it. And so I hope that you all will support the Fair Play Collective in whatever way you can. As I've said multiple times, all the information we've discussed will be down in the show notes. So support Dylan, support the Fair Play Collective, and thank you so much for doing so. As far as my little spiel for this week goes, it's mainly going to be centered around my journey with getting a PS2. So I have recently kind of been obsessed with trying to have retro experiences on the original hardware. I'd emulated a lot of stuff in the past, and had kind of gotten a sense for the games that I'd missed out on, either because I was a child and didn't have access to all this technology, or it happened before I was born, trying to gain a better sense of not only kind of these iconic games. I was playing Silent Hill 2 yesterday, and that's kind of just an example of a game that I had a complete blind spot on and was pleasantly surprised to find out how much it had taken inspiration from some of my favorite TV shows like Twin Peaks. But not only getting these like single game experiences, but also trying to get hands-on with the technology that defined the more consolidated games industry that Dylan and I discussed in our conversation. And so I was looking around and thinking like I could get a PS2, just a normal one, and try to buy these games. That PS2 games are actually like in still a relatively cheap realm. PS1 games have gotten to the point where like the ones that are collector's items, your Chrono Triggers, your Silent Hills, your Resident Evils, Vagrant Story, all of that type of stuff is reaching up into kind of the $150 range for complete in-box physical copies, and so that's not really money that I want to spend or have, frankly. And so I was thinking like, how can I get the most bang for my buck? Getting a PS2 which can play back compatible PS1 games, and I found a seller on eBay that was making these kind of like custom modded PS2s with like their own custom hardware, basically, that he was building in himself. It's a level of hardware expertise that I don't have, and frankly don't have an interest in tinkering with myself. So I was like, yes, let's do it. This maker happened to be based in the UK, and I was like, won't be a problem, right? Well, turns out my little young brain had no idea about how tech worked back then. And not only is there a major difference in the like voltage levels coming out of the walls in the US relative to the UK, but there's also a major difference in how the images would appear on a TV for a PAL based system, which is like Europe and Australia, relative to an NTSC, I think it's called, system, which is like North America. And so basically I got my modded PS2. I was like, yes, let's go. I plugged it in. Well, first I had to get a new power supply with a US plug, which wasn't hard. Just ordered that on Amazon for pennies, and plugged it in when that came and was like, yes, let's go. It was getting no power. It wasn't even like the red little pilot light thing wasn't even coming on. And I was like, damn, did this system break in transit? Messaged the guy on eBay. He was like, you idiot, you gotta get it's not just gonna work because not enough voltage comes out of the walls in the US. The UK runs on 220 to, I believe it's 220 to 240 voltage system, and the US runs on a 100 to 120 voltage system. And I'm like, damn, should I just return this thing, eat the shipping cost, which would be great from Seattle to the UK, it's a long way, but I did a little bit more research. Turns out for about $50, which, I mean, it's not great that I'm spending that much more, but oh well. It's like but a third of the price of Silent Hill 2 alone. And I was looking into it, and it was like, for $50 you can get a voltage converter, which basically takes the signal coming out of the walls and amps it up so you can use systems and appliances and electronics from the UK in the US. So did that, bought that, went out and picked it up yesterday, plugged it in. Okay, I was getting a signal from the PS2 itself. That's awesome. I used the little HD TV to PS2 adapter that came with the kit I bought from the guy to try to plug it into my TCL Roku TV, which we have in our room. It's just an old one. It's not high tech at all, but it is modern, right? It's new. Tried to plug it in via HDMI. Picture wasn't coming up. Nothing was registering at all. So I was like, damn, another hurdle. Turns out there's a whole industry, which makes sense for retro games people. There's a whole industry kind of upscaling the 3 AV plugins from PS2s and earlier to modern TVs. There are really expensive boxes that you can buy, like over $100. But there are kind of more minutia with TVs related to, like, you know, PS1 will only show up on TVs that can take a certain signal. PS2 will only show up on TVs that will only take a certain signal, and like each time that's stepping down. So to play PS1, you need a TV that can recognize the signal at 240p, to play PS2, you need a TV that can recognize the signal around like 520, I think, P. And long story short, I tried this modded PS2 on all the TVs in our house. We live in a group home, so we have a TV in our bedroom, and we also have a TV downstairs that's kind of like a communal TV that's a little bit older. It's kind of this big behemoth flat screen that I think someone found on the side of the road, and it worked in that TV, and I was like, yes, let's go. So I finally got picture and was playing some PS2 games with my whole kind of rigged setup with this voltage converter and the modded PS2 and the HDMI adapter and all this stuff that is kind of janky as it stands. And I think moving forward, I'm either going to invest in one of these upscalers or just get an old CRT. But all that's to say, I got my PS2 working and then was trying to fiddle around with some PS1 games yesterday, and it turns out that those weren't recognized by the TV downstairs, so I'll be limited to PS2 as it stands. But the modded PS2 that I bought has all of these games built in, and I've really been enjoying kind of messing around with it. So expect some updates on that to come. Right now, I'm playing Oni, which is a game I had never heard about that was developed in a rare collaboration between Bungie and Rockstar. I don't know how I'd never heard of it before, but I'm excited to dig in more. Thanks for sticking with me through that relatively unrelated to indie games, retro games rant, but it's stuff that's fascinating to me, and I hope you got a little something out of it. If you've been listening this far, then hopefully you like the show. Hopefully you're not a masochist, subjecting yourself to torture in the ears. And if you are, I'm sorry that's what I am. But if you do like it, thank you so much for being here. You can support the show by telling one friend. I don't do anything to market it right now, so just telling someone about it is the best thing you can do. If you want to support me with a click, you can click subscribe on YouTube or any of your podcast platforms. You can also leave a rating or review. You can do that on Apple Podcasts or just click the stars on Spotify. That would help me. You can comment on one of my YouTube videos, give me a like, what have you. There's plenty of ways you can do it. You can find everything at Indie Game Garden. Sometimes all one word if it's a username. I'm on Instagram too. And follow me on Blue Sky and be in conversation with me there. I check it regularly and I'm providing updates on the games I'm playing, etc. On Blue Sky, I'm at Darth Malks. That is M as in Michael, ALKS as in Sam. And yeah, it's kind of like Darth Maul, you know? That's my little tag, my little gamer tag. And yeah, thanks for listening. I've been Johnny and will continue to be Johnny, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.